Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Chess World Cup 2023. This is a knockout tournament that starts with 128 players, and the top finishers will qualify for the Candidates Chess Tournament, which is the tournament that determines who will play for the World Chess Championship. Magnus Carlson is playing, Hikaru Nakamura is playing, Fabiano Caruana, Jan Nepomniachtchi, Anish Giri, you name it. A top player is there, and they're probably one of your favorite players. Now, Magnus has started like a locomotive, and in this video, I'm going to show you how he used a ridiculous stockfish-like idea to deliver a sensational game. Also, how he avoided nearly collapsing. There's going to be a Hikaru game. We're going to go all around, and then we're going to take a look at the bracket. It's going to be spectacular. Buckle up. So, and as you can see, we will also have a Gukesh game as well. Magnus Carlson actually in the round of 32 got paired against Ari Tari, who is the number 2 from Norway. I mean, that's brutal. You got to knock out a countryman. Magnus began this game with the move d4 and invited on this third move the Nimzo Indian defense. Normally, when black starts like this, white most frequently plays knight f3 to try to play a Catalan, to try to play a two-knight setup. But going like this is very forcing because you are trying to play the move e4, and here black can play bishop to b4, which is exactly what black wants, and it's one of the most theoretically complicated openings in chess. Now, Magnus plays e3. You will notice he spent 6 minutes on the fourth move. Maybe he got locked in the toilet, but it's more than that. It's the fact that the Nimzo Indian is extremely complex. It is very, very, very complicated. There are a lot of branches. Already, white can play no less than something like 7 lines. White can still play this. Queen c2 and e3 are the main lines. Within e3 and queen c2, there are lines. White can play bishop d2, a3, f3, g3, okay? Queen b3, if you really want to. Bishop to g5. There are so many lines. And Magnus plays e3, but then he does not play knight f3 or knight e2 or bishop d3 or any of the lines that look like they should follow e3. He plays bishop to d2. This has become very, very trendy. And the idea is basically, I want to do this and I want to take with my bishop. I do not want to double my pawns. So that is the thing that he goes for. Now, let's also keep in mind these two are friends. They've probably trained together, and they probably know some of each other's opening ideas, which makes this a little bit stranger. Tari plays c5. He thinks a little bit. He plays c5. He's going to play c5 and then d5 and then chop everything down. We're going to have a very clarified position. Magnus plays a3. So far, we have not seen the uncorking of the idea. And now Tari, instead of attacking the center, plays knight to e4 and tries to just get the bishop. So something like bishop d3, take, b6, put the bishop on the diagonal. And black has absolutely no problems here in the opening. d6, knight d7. It's a totally equal position. So Magnus plays knight e2 with the intention of taking back the bishop with the knight. Tari plays b6. The idea to bring out the bishop over here to either of these two squares to apply pressure. Now Magnus plays this move d5. Okay, d5 closes up the center, doesn't allow black to take anymore, and the bishop is open. You're occupying a bit of space, removing knight c6, and also bishop b7 no longer has any control in the diagonal. Tari plays bishop to a6, which attacks the pawn over here, which you would think would be defended with the move pawn to b3. There is literally nothing else. You could play queen d3, but that's not a great move because your queen will be induced forward, and there's a really goofy line here like this, but the queen actually gets trapped. So you would think after bishop to a6 that he's going to defend this pawn with either the pawn or maybe in some obscure way with the queen, but no. In this position, Magnus spends a little bit of time and he plays an idea that is really, really dank. It is a dank idea. Another way to defend the pawn on c4 is to not defend it at all. It's to create a threat that's equal or exceeding in danger. f3, which attacks the knight. And then if this, and this is defending that, and life is good. And then if take, you're going to take with the pawn or the knight, life is going to be good. However, f3 does not actually defend this pawn at all. And it looks like at this point, Magnus Carlson blunders a pawn. Knight c3, knight c3. And in this position, after I have just told you that this pawn is defended by this bishop, Ariantari plays bishop takes c4. And as you can see from the evaluation bar, something's wrong. He's supposed to be losing a bishop. But Magnus's move f3 allows queen h4 check, which would attack the bishop and the king. You cannot start with queen to h4 because then I would go g3. But you can start with queen h4 after this, because after it takes queen h4, you're just going to win a pawn. But it's Magnus Carlson. I mean, obviously he didn't lose that pawn by accident. And now Magnus plays h4. In fact, he plays h4 instantly, because if you subtract 30 seconds from his time, that means he played h4 with 20 seconds on the clock. He had 24 in the beginning. He spent 4 seconds on this move. Magnus Carlson loses a pawn in the opening, just absolutely loses a pawn, and just plays h4. Doesn't castle. He's moved all the pawns in front of his king. His king is open and airy, and it looks like he can be invaded at any moment. Doesn't matter. You know what the idea is? The idea is make a move for black. Just make a move. It's not so easy. If you put your knight out on the edge of the board, he's going to go h5. If you try to stop him like this, he's going to play rook h4 and your queen is trapped. How did that... What? How did that happen? Well, that's the idea. The idea is to advance the pawn far enough that it just takes squares away and then play rook h4. And then just play this position. Put the king on f2, nice and solid. Bring out the queen, bring out the rook to the center, bring out this rook over. He just plays h4. And Aryan tries to develop his pieces. But after b3, Magnus has 4 of his 5 pieces on their starting squares after 16 moves, and every pawn has been pushed. But the queen has to go here. Now there's a fork, queen a5 check, this blocks, this takes, and he grabs the rook in the corner, and then he trades the queens and emerges in this position. This was Magnus Carlsen's preparation. He prepared over 20 moves to get this position, where he has a rook for a knight and 2 pawns. Black has 6 pawns, white has 4. And essentially, he is arguing that due to the split structure that black has, like the pawns are not all together, they are weak and they are exploitable. And Magnus will pose problems in the rook versus knight endgame. So he allows the pawn over here to be captured. He could have tried to hang on with like rook c3, but then black would have played b5, a5, a4. So instead he goes here, plays king f2, brings his rook, wins this pawn, and now basically has to win this endgame, where black has 2 split pawns. He's going to go over here, but then in that time, white is going to sneak over here and try to pose problems, and Ariantari has to defend this absolutely nightmarish endgame against Magnus. But he's doing it. He's doing it. Now, it's very difficult. You know, if he plays king c5 and just tries to advance, Magnus is going to play rook to h8. That attacks this pawn. If takes, and you push, now I've created an outside pass pawn, and I'm probably going to win this game. All right? I don't even have to rush with that, but h5. And then after something like that, f6, I got h6. You play b4, you know, I don't know. Maybe I want to play king f4, king f5. b3, king f5. It's a very tough position to defend because I'm always fast enough. And unfortunately, well, fortunately, depending on who you're cheering for, Aryan goes here. And that unfortunately strands the h-pawn. And between the weakness of the h-pawn and the fact that black has 4 pawn islands, 4 pawns, but they're all islands. They have no neighbors. And it's very easy to hunt them down. Black simply runs out of moves. King d4, rook g7, rook a7, check from the side, 1 pawn down, 2 pawns down on b3, and this is just a winning king and pawn endgame because after king f5, king c4, king c5, black simply runs out of moves, and you lose this endgame. Ariantari resigned. Magnus Carlsen played this game at nearly perfect accuracy. He played an opening which sacrificed the pawn, pushed his h-pawn, won in exchange, and then converted this endgame absolutely beautifully. Now, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The very next day, because they have to play 2 games against each other, Magnus played Hikaru Khan, and Ariantari just went at him. I mean, he was out for revenge. He went after Magnus. Look at this, e6, sacrificing a pawn to get him to compromise his structure. ef7, this was a very complicated game. Knight f3, h4, and, you know, Magnus created this obscure setup, and Aryan put pressure on the e-pawn, not letting it move forward, put his knight there, developed his pieces, and had a fantastic position where for the early stage of the game, it really looked like he had everything under control, and if Aryan could break through over here, he would be in great shape. Magnus is going to try to create counterplay on the queen side. This all culminated right around in this moment when c5 was on the board, take, and rather than taking, Aryan played knight d3, attacking the pawn. In this position, Magnus has to play pawn takes d4 because he has to remove the access to the c5 square. Instead, he played c4. And if knight c5 now, black plays knight d7, or there is knight g6 as well, just blocking the pawn, and then you will simply attack on this side. But in this position, after c4, Ariantari can do what is called a clearance sacrifice, and he can play pawn to g6. That loses a pawn 3 different ways, but the idea is that the g file is open, and the bishop can go there. So after this, he is actually winning. He has a winning advantage versus Magnus. Rook g8, rook g1, bishop g5 on the way, and if something like this, oh, not like that, but if like this, and, you know, over here, queen f2, and it's just a slow matter of time. It's just a matter of time before you try to get in on the dark squares. Of course, there is still a lot of game to be played, but g6 was the idea. But Aryan unfortunately gets blockaded, and with that side of the board completely sealed, the players rotate this way, and Magnus actually could have probably applied more pressure from this position potentially, but the players agree to a draw because the only open file now is the b1, and everything is going to get traded, opposite colored bishops, and Magnus Carlson, bittersweet moment, eliminates his friend Ariantari. Yeah, there was like this obscure g6 move that might have given Aryan some winning chances, but that's what the computer said. All right, that is not what I'm saying. That is what the computer said. Magnus Carlson has eliminated Ariantari with an absolutely spectacular win in the first game, where he just played this. He just played like this. He played some ridiculous engine idea, and he won. Now, Hikaru hasn't won a game yet in classical chess. He drew 2 games against Karthik Venkataraman from India. Then he drew the first game against Benjamin Gladura from Hungary. But okay, Hikaru was black. I mean, you can't just beat everybody. I mean, Magnus was, but even Magnus made a draw. But this game, Hikaru plays a Spanish. He plays d3, and it's going to be a long, maneuvering, complex game. We have a3, we have c4. The first trade happens after 17 moves of action. A very tense position. Hikaru captures, Gladura captures, Hikaru goes for his bishop, Gladura says no, knight g3 rotates to the king side, and there's Hikaru. Look at this. Basically, Hikaru's already threatening to win the game, essentially. What I mean by that is bishop takes f6 is lethal. Queen h5, knight here, block the center, bring a rook to the 3rd rank. It's very, very bad stuff. So now we're going to have an explosion of pawns on the queen side and the following position where Hikaru has a slight edge. He has a slight edge because his pieces are a little bit more active and a little bit more useful. This bishop is sort of staring at a brick wall. Hikaru's pieces are not. And this rook is staring at an open file, and this one isn't, but the open file is not that useful. Knight f1, Hikaru trades off black's only active piece, let's put it this way. So now that bishop is just gone. And now it's essentially a question of whose light squared bishop is better. And it's Hikaru's. And a couple of moves later, he makes a couple of preparations. The dark squares have been severely weakened. You will remember that earlier in this game, the move g6 was played by Gladura. This is a massive strategic risk. It was probably better for him if he was going to push anything to play h6. But because he played g6, Hikaru very, very confidently trades off the dark squared bishop, puts his queen as the replacement to the dark squared attacker, and just plays f4. And now he is posing some very serious problems. Gladura has 10 minutes to make 11 moves, which is not a lot of time. He plays knight to h5, Hikaru plays knight to g4, and as you can see, this is bad. And this is going to open, the rook is going to come to the f file, the second rook is going to come to the f file, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 pieces are going to attack 1, 2 defenders. I mean, this bishop just got there, and you're going to see it doesn't participate in this game much. That bishop move there on the 9th move of the game, bishop to b7. And then the entire game is happening without that bishop's input. Like, nobody is asking for that bishop's opinion. It's barely participating. And here comes Hikaru. And in this position, knight takes e5, he wins a pawn. And now he is completely winning if he plays knight takes f7. And knight takes f7 is not a complex calculation. You just go here. And the idea is rook takes, you don't take, you use the... you use PP on the PP, which is put pressure on the pin piece, rook f1. And if black defends, you take, and then you PP on the PP again. And then after something like knight to f4, you just take. Because now there is another PP on the PP, g3. Completely winning position, queen d3, rook f4 check, mate will follow. You know, maybe in this position there is like queen a2 check, and maybe Hikaru just didn't like that his king was a little bit weak here, but queen f2, rook f8, you see, like, you know, the computer makes a little bit of a comeback. But instead of that, Hikaru plays knight g4, which is still winning, and he still applies pressure. He is still a pawn up. And you will notice that black's bishop went back to c8, undeveloping, and then to b7. And this was just a dominant performance from Hikaru. In this position, Gladura resigned. He didn't have to resign, but he was about to lose a second pawn, and if he tried to defend the second pawn, then rook f6 would have happened, so he would have lost the queen, bishop, or a queen. He might have, you know, he might have not seen that. So Hikaru wins, and Hikaru is into the round of 16, just like Magnus Carlson, which is amazing. It's good that we have had no upsets for them. We have had other upsets. This was a game from the Women's World Cup. Eline Hobersch is playing, I'm trying to pronounce her name the Dutch way, but listen, y'all, those of you who speak Dutch, you know that this is not easy. Eline Hobersch. It's like Hobersch. I'm doing my best, all right? I speak a few languages. I don't speak Dutch. She has been absolutely murdering people. Like, when she leaves the playing hall, they drug test her. Okay, I have no evidence of this whatsoever. I'm simply saying she has stomped the field, okay? And today, against Claudia Coulon from Poland, it really did not stop. She played a King's Indian defense, which is a very, very tense opening position. Her opponent went at her. Her opponent castled on opposite sides, and this is just a good old-fashioned fight. I'm talking about Ramirez versus Anderson, all right? The White Sox game yesterday, where he landed the punch, that was ridiculous stuff. Knight c5, a5, and Elina is just like, yo, you want to attack me? It's like the Joker. You want to know how I got these scars? And I mean, look at this. H4. She is walking her down. Meanwhile, this is a sniper. The A file. The queen is coming in. B5, C6, knight B3 on the way. Bishop C6. White arrives with G5, stopping any black advancements. Now H5 and takes, and bishop H3 and rook H1. Somebody's gonna get checkmated. Rook A5 from Elina. Now, in this position, Claudia just had to go. Because after bishop takes b5, c takes b5, rook takes b5, e5 is the key, sealing out the bishop. And after something like d5, now you play bishop f1, which forces the rook away, and now you continue your attack. The thing is, if you don't play bishop f1, and if you play pawn takes g6, a3, and then there's b3, and then there's sacrifices, and then there's another knight coming to c5, and then you try to deliver checkmate, but it's actually you who is getting checkmated in a crazy turn of events. So it's a very complex position. She addresses the position over here, and in this position, b5, cb5, and white thought her opponent was going to play bishop takes b5, but in this position, Elina sacrifices the rook! Rook takes b5, creating a necessity for white to address the attack. She takes the rook. Queen takes b5, but the queen gets closer. The queen avoids a trade of queens. Somehow black's position is elastic. It is defending, it is attacking at the same time. The bishop takes the knight, but the knight is replaced with another knight. f5, and here comes bishop e5, escaping the trap and hitting the knight on g3, and then the rook on h2. Pawn takes e6. Bishop takes g3, attacks the rook, but e7 is a discovered check, and the rook is under attack, so the rook has to block. The rook moves out of danger, attacking the bishop. The bishop moves, gives a check. The king slides out of danger, and now the king unpins himself. The pawn is a square away from queening, but the bishop on c6, the MVP, preventing the queen. h5, white is still trying to create an attack, but now the e-pawn has fallen. Bishop d3, b3, pawn takes h5, and now that same MVP bishop, who for a long time prevented a promotion, rotates backwards, and it's not just for defense, it is also for offense. The king is protected. The bishops guard the king and attack the white king, and now it's time to pay up. A takes b3 en passant. Knight takes e4, knight c3 is a check, b2 is a check, and in this position, white's king is checkmated. And Elina moves on to the quarterfinals of the Women's World Cup. She has played 6 games of classical chess, and she has 6 wins. She's a beast. She is a beast. And that women's bracket has also the women's world champion, June, Alexandra Goryachkina, okay, who was the previous challenger to the Women's World Championship, so it's one to watch, but Elina has been she just, like, murks people. Like, her chess style is ridiculous, and it really, really works. And by the way, we've got other amazing games. We have Alexei Sarana versus Kirill Shevchenko, which just a year ago would have been a matchup of Russia and Ukraine, because Alexei represented Russia and Kirill represented Ukraine. But now Alexei moved his federation, for obvious reasons, to Serbia, and Kirill has moved his federation to Romania. And I can only imagine it's because there's big opportunities right now in Romanian chess. Like, Report represents Romania as well, so they seem to be building a very strong team. So it's just crazy to see Serbia versus Romania when it's these two players. And this was so a quick note about this game. It was 26 moves, and it was 99.5% accuracy. Watch. It is a Grunfeld defense, bishop g5, bishop g7, and in this position, rather than developing, he takes the knight. He wins the pawn, but black now starts firing away at his center and continues to fire away at his center and his b2 pawn. Knight to b3, a5 going after the knight, pawn to e3, a4 going after the knight, bishop to b5 check, now knight to d4, and everything is traded, and this is the position. This is the position, but look at the time. Alexei Sarana has not spent any time. He hasn't thought. This is his prep. Best move for black now, rook a5. Knight c3, knight a6, king d2. It has been 17 moves. He still has not stopped to think. The king is coming to the queen side. The rook is going to go to the center line. Maybe you're going to advance over here. He is up nearly 1 hour on the clock. He's not winning, but this is a very tough position to defend. Black plays king d7, which is an inaccuracy. You're supposed to play knight to b4 and try to take this pawn with the knight right away. King to d7, now b4. Now here's the thing about b4. There is en passant, but then you trade the rooks. And knight b4, there is this. Knight takes d5, and he gets to take on b7. Now, Sarana actually played the rest of his prep. He just stopped to think in this position. All of this was the right stuff. But here, black should have played king c8. Allowed this, and then played rook d8 and tried to defend this position. Both rooks guard the knight. It's unpleasant. There might be knight e4 and knight c5, but it's holdable. Unfortunately, after 20 moves of getting hit with preparation, Shevchenko played knight c7. One mistake, rook b1, knight b5, and he's simply going to lose the game because the knight is going to a7. It arrives on a7. There is nothing black can do. If black plays rook a8, I play rook c1, not rook d1, rook c1 and rook c7, and then I take over there. Knight a7, rook a7, and in this position, Kirill Shevchenko resigned. His World Cup campaign is over, and Alexei Sarana is through to the round of 16 with a 99.5% accuracy. 0 inaccuracies in this game, 0 mistakes, 0 blunders, 0 missed wins. He just played a perfect game. I mean, he just played from start to finish a perfect game of chess where he applied pressure onto his opponent in preparation, and then he had to convert the advantage, and his opponent made one mistake, and Sarana wins. And you know who else we are watching in this event? We are watching the newly minted number 9 ranked chess player in the world, the number 1 ranked player in India, Gukesh, who's playing SL Narayanan, who's a very strong grandmaster in his own right. And this game was a fun one. It was an open Spanish. An open Spanish is when black takes on e4 and then plays b5 and d5. We don't see it very often at top level because they're kind of wimpy. They prefer to play solidly. Knight c5, bishop g4. And it was in this game that Gukesh went for an attack. Then he took the knight, and then he went for an attack on that side of the board. He's playing in the center, he's playing on the queen side, he's playing on the king side, putting pressure on black's central pawns. A4. Gukesh is using all his resources. It's a beautiful display of how all his pawns on all three sides of the board are advancing, how he's pushing black backwards, and black has to defend. Black strikes back with the move c5. We have takes, and now the knight plops into the center of the board. b4. White takes on b4. The bishop takes on b4. Now white makes a rook move to activate along this c-file. And now the knight jumps into the position, which attacks the bishop on a5 and hits the knight on e7. And if the knight takes on c6, the pawn on d5 is going to fall with various tactics. Bishop takes d5, bishop c6, bishop f7 pressure, various queen c4 ideas as well, rook c6, rook c5, all this different stuff. Black plays knight to b4. That was not the best move. The best move was to take on e5 and then jump in here to cut communications. But like we've seen, chess is just one mistake. So knight to b4, bishop takes a8. We have the queen taking the pawn on a4. The rook slides out of the way to hit the queen slides to b3. Now bishop to e4, trying to trade off black's light squared bishop. Takes, queen takes h3. You can't rush to take the bishop because queen g4 check is a fork, but he's not going to blunder that. Instead, he plays bishop to e3. Now the queen on e4 defends the pawn on g4. The bishop goes back to c7. Now the bishop gets chased. Bishop to b8. The rook infiltrates to c5. h5, rook c1. We trade the queens, but Gukesh plays rook to c8. And that move hits the rook. If you take, I win the bishop with a fork. And if you play something like rook f8, take, and it's more of the same. Rook to c8. Narayanan resigns. Gukesh is into the round of 16. He is now 5 points higher than Vishy Anand on the India ratings list. That is the highest gap that anybody has ever had. He's officially and dominantly becoming the #1 ranked chess player in India. Also, he is 2 rating points away from being the #7 ranked chess player in the world. Gukesh is 2 rating points away from eclipsing Anish Giri and Wesley So, 2 players that have been at the top of chess for over 10 years as the #7 ranked chess player in the world. Let's take a look at our bracket, all right? This is absolutely sensational stuff. Welcome to the World Cup bracket on the FIDE website. It's at the very top. We have Magnus Carlson and Vincent Kayma. They are going to be meeting in the quarterfinals. In the round of 16. Here we await the winner of Vahal Sanap and Anton Korobov and Vasil Ivanchuk and Wei Yi. Everything is tied at 1. Rasmus Svane eliminates the Cinderella story of Tin Jingyao from Singapore, and he will play the winner of Wang Hao and David Howell. Gukesh, monster, sending home a fellow Indian. It's bittersweet, but there are 5 Indian players remaining, okay? I'm talking about, where are they? Vidit is still remaining, and by the way, Daniel Vocaturo from Italy defeating Daniil Dubov. That's a massive result. Vidit is still in. Nihal is still in. We have Arjun Erigaisi somewhere here. Where is he? Arjun Erigaisi is still here. All right, we have Pragnananda still here, and on the other side we have Hikaru, and probably it's going to be Hikaru versus Prague, which is crazy, which is an incredible sight. Obviously they are on other sides. Javahir Sindarov from Uzbekistan knocking out Maxime Vacher-Lagrave from France. That is a massive result. A lot of these matches will be decided in the tiebreaks. On the women's side, we have already some quarterfinal matchups. Anna Muzichuk qualifying. She will play the winner of this matchup over here. She might actually play her sister, which is kind of wild. Shuvalova, we have Aulia Medina Warda from Indonesia, which is an amazing run, and Elina awaits the winner of Harika versus Javakhishvili, and Nino Batsashvili awaits the winner of Guryachkina versus Divya Desmukh. So the women's side is around faster because there are less women. That's just the reality, and also I guess some of the format stuff. But we're not going to open that Pandora's box right now. Magnus Carlson winning in style, Hikaru winning in style. A lot of matches will still be decided in the tiebreaks. This was fun. If you're watching this on the day it comes out, which is August 6th, have a great Sunday. If you're watching this at any point in the future, I hope you've had a great Sunday or multiple great Sundays. Ice cream and also the day of the week. That's all for me. Get out of here.